Welcome to the Her Voice Shines podcast, where we celebrate the power, brilliance, and resilience of women everywhere. I'm your host, Chenadra Washington. Join us as we share inspiring stories and insights from extraordinary women who have found their voice and are making a difference. Together, we'll create a ripple effect, illuminating the path to visibility and empowerment. Let's break barriers, shatter ceilings, and lift each other up. In each episode, we dive deep into the journeys of women who have turned their challenges into triumphs and their dreams into reality. Whether you're looking for motivation, guidance, or a community that understands your journey, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and remember, let your voice shine. And just like that, we are back with another amazing episode. Time is flying around here, but guess what? You already know this. This is my favorite tagline. It's one of my favorite places to be. I'm your amazing host, Chenadra Washington, streaming from the beautiful city of Houston, Texas. And we have another amazing guest today on the Her Voice Shines podcast. Chenadra wasting no time because I bring this place to you to really highlight my guest. So I want to jump right in. We're going to bring our fabulous guest to the stage. She'll tell us her name, where she's streaming from, and guess what? She'll jump right into that story. And without any further waiting time, here she is.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Irene. I'm streaming from Sacramento, California. So I am on the sunny West Coast. I lived as an imposter in my own life for over a decade. And for me, that looked like I would see other people and the way that they shined at work, and I would try to work like they did. I would see the way that other people showed up as a mom, and I would try to show up the way that they did with my kids. I, at the time, was married to a pastor, and I'd see how other pastors' wives would show up in their life, and I tried to show up like them. And it was exhausting. It was so lonely because no matter what I did, I felt like I couldn't be me. I felt like there was nothing in my life that was true because I wasn't living as my true self. And I felt frustrated. It was like there was this dark cloud that was just hanging over my life. And a lot of times I would look at that and I would think, here I am in this religious setting, and I'm not a black and white thinker. I think with all sorts of color, shades of gray, all of it. I am someone who loves to achieve things. If someone gives me a goal, I'm like, hold my water, my drink, whatever. I'm going to go meet that goal. I love big, audacious goals. But I was in a setting that said, no, you need to be content where you are. You need to chill it a little bit and not be so forward thinking. Just focus on the present and be grateful for what you've got. Not in a great way. And I'm also somebody who can take two seemingly opposing ideas and bring them together in harmony in a way that not everybody else can. But I thought that that was all evidence of something wrong with me. I spent years thinking that those were things that were proof that I'm dysfunctional. And this eventually led to a place where my marriage crumbled, my sense of community was gone, and my sense of identity was gone. So marriage, community, identity, all gone within a matter of like a month. And it was heartbreaking. I remember talking to my therapist and she said, Kelly, you are at the point where you've gone through a disaster in your life and you're surveying the damage. And I knew what she was talking about because I had lived in Louisville, Kentucky for 5 years, and we'd have tornado sirens that would go off when there was a warning or a tornado in sight. And we'd have to go down into our basement. And I remember a friend telling me that one of the times he was in his basement, he heard the rush of the train going over, is what it sounds like or feels like if you ever have a tornado going over you. And when he came back up where there had been a house standing, there was nothing left. No walls, no roof, nothing. It was gone. And he had to survey the damage, and it was shocking. And that is what my life felt like at that time. And it was in surveying the damage, in surveying all the ways that I had, that my life crumbled because I had lived as an imposter, that I started to realize I have to rebuild this life with me and who I am at the center. Not in a selfish way, but in a how can I live a life that's not mine? How can I live a life that's somebody else's? It has to be a life that recognizes the truth of who I am. And the thing that helped me most with that is something that I had previously chalked up to either being filler in a women's magazine at best or demonic at worst. And that is astrology. It was in learning about myself through personal astrology that I realized I'm constantly thinking about the future because my sun is in Aquarius, and I shine when I think about the future. I shine when I think about the collective, when I think about what's going to be good for the collective, not just what's good because it's part of a tradition. My moon is in Capricorn. Our moon signs get at what we need to feel safe and secure and satisfied. Well, that's a sign that is like, hey, if there's a mountain peak, I'm going to the top of it. That is where I need to be. And those are my inner needs. And so no wonder I was constantly trying to achieve my goals because that meets my core needs. And then my rising sign, the way that I process new information and new situations is in Libra. That's a sign that's all about balance and harmony and integration. It doesn't do the black and white thinking. And so, again, these things that I thought were proof of something wrong with me are actually my superpowers. And it took learning about myself through astrology to realize that. But when I did, it just changed everything. It's like all of a sudden, instead of trying to look at how somebody else is showing up at work, I'm showing up as myself. I'm now the HR director for a company that provides therapy and medication management for clients that are on Medicare, clients who typically do not get access to equitable healthcare. I'm doing that, and that's so aligned with my drive for doing things that are good for the collective. It's the first time that they've ever had an HR director. It's a 3-year-old company. So I have these mountain peak challenges to meet as as the first and only HR person in the company. I get to, employees are constantly, they've got all kinds of ideas of how things should be, but I get to bring what can feel very chaotic into this really beautiful, harmonious understanding between employees and the company. And so it was, you can see learning about myself this way helped me to really show up and shine in alignment with who I am rather than trying to do it as somebody else. And that's the same for being a parent. That's the same for how I am in my relationships. All of that shifted when I, one, learned about who I am, but two, gave myself permission to allow me to be the definition of what's normal for my life.
It's a lot out of that first segment, Kelly. Let me calm down because I'm gonna have to face my questions. I have a lot of questions.
Ask away. I'm here for this.
The first thing is that I want you guys to hear this. Kelly said that she was trying to show up like everybody else, trying to show up with everybody else in terms of even being a mother. Number one, guys, you know how draining that is? Some of you are sitting in places to where you are continuously trying to do it like everybody else when you were never designed. You were never designed to do it like them. So for you to shine light there, I always make a connection back to the audience because many of them are sitting in those spaces as they listen to us. Mm-hmm. And it's important that they get that transformation piece that she said, no, enough is enough. And I'm going to find a different way. Everything around me is essentially crumbling because I'm showing up as everybody else in the world except for Kelly.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that they get that. The other part is that, like, I'm kind of like a nerd. Like, I just read all kinds of stuff. So I just honestly learned, Kelly, about the moon and the rising. Yeah. I just learned about this maybe earlier this year. So I always be like, one day this seemingly random information is going to have a place. So I always just keep reading whatever and I eventually get the conversation I need to have. But I'm a Cancer. My birthday is June 25th, and I embody everything about the Cancer. Everything about it is the perfect, exact example, I think, of me and how I live my life. I want you to start to bridge kind of what you teach to somebody out there who's new to it, because I had no idea about the rising and there's the moon.
Yeah.
No idea. I just want to give like heavy, just go at astrology for someone who doesn't even know where to even look and what the rising and all those things actually mean. You touched on it, but I want to make sure we get the goal right here.
Yeah, and that is one of my favorite things to do, is to teach people who've never heard of personal astrology what it means for them, because it is so applicable and practical today. And so when we talk about what's called a birth chart, it's essentially a map of where the planets were at the moment that we were born. And it's really something that's simple to pull up. It's astro-charts.com. I'm happy to give you that link for later. But when you look at it, there's three things that I tell people to look at to start with: their sun sign, moon sign, and rising. And so this is, where was the sun when you were born? Most of us know what that is. So you were June 21st, your sun is in Cancer. The moon sign changes every like 2 to 3 days. And so that's going to be different, for you than it is for somebody who was born June 25th. The rising sign changes throughout the entire day. So it goes through all 12 zodiac signs in a single day. So that's going to change and make a huge impact on your chart. And essentially, what this gets at is our sunshine tells us how we're meant to show up and shine in the world. What is kind of our big theme of our personality, of the way that we show up. And your Cancer is the crab. So I always think hard shell, soft interior. It's very nurturing, very intuitive, likes to make a home for itself and for others. And so for me, like I said, mine's Aquarius. That's going to be completely different, but it really gets into how we're meant to shine. Our moon sign gets into, what do I need when I'm at work, when I'm at home, when I am thinking about what am I going to be doing next? What do I need to feel satisfied? What do I need to feel safe? What do I need to feel successful? As well as, how do I tap into my intuition? How do I tap into my emotions? Because it's going to be different for me with my moon in Capricorn than it will be for you wherever your moon happens to be. And then our rising sign is essentially the lens that we see the world through. So it's that filter. When I go into a new situation, when I'm meeting somebody new, when I'm reading something new, learning something new, what are those first questions that I'm asking? And those are going to be totally different for me than they are for somebody with a different rising sign. It also gets at our motivations, what motivates me compared to what motivates you.
Oh yeah, see that's good. And I remember, because I didn't. I mean, I think most people don't have the lens into that. So when
Mhm.
I started to kind of research, and you're right, it was consistently changing. I did find some accuracies in it, so it was definitely a
Yeah.
different path for me to kind of explore. But I mean, I was really. I think I read about maybe 10 or 11 different links that night, Kelly. I was just on a tangent, really trying to
I love
understand
it.
what
Yeah.
all this meant. But that's really how really how I'm wired. I want to ask you this. I know that there was a journey that you probably had to go through, I'm sure, in trusting yourself. Because
Yes.
it's like imposter syndrome, right? We talk about a lot on the show.
Mhm.
And then beyond that, it's like, I gotta trust myself to do it. I have to trust
Yeah.
myself to walk in this newness and present myself as the real Kelly Irene. Talk about that kind of period to trusting yourself. And then I
Mhm.
want you to maybe give a couple of tips for someone to lean in to maybe start the process of truly trusting themselves.
Yeah. That for me was really difficult because, especially coming from a religious setting, I was taught not to trust myself. And so there was some unlearning that had to happen. And, going back to that metaphor of what happens after a natural disaster, you have to clear away the debris before you can even consider rebuilding. And so sometimes it does require that before we can move forward, we have to attend to what's happening in the present. And I think that that applies to how we trust ourselves. So we have to be honest about the stories that we're telling ourselves that keep us from trusting ourselves. And from there, it's, for me, my sense of knowing is in my stomach. That's where my intuition resides. We all have it in different places in our bodies, but practicing that, it can even just be, do I want to wear this shirt or that shirt today? Something that's really, kind of risk free, and going with what you feel and allowing yourself to make those little decisions so that when you need to make bigger decisions about, a job or a relationship or um, a financial purchase or whatever, you're already getting used to that. But it's practicing those little things. And then I think along with that, for me, it's trusting myself goes hand in hand with living in alignment with who I am. And so the more that I've gotten to know who I am, then the more that I've been able to make decisions based on, is this aligned with what I know about myself? And that, I think that would be like my biggest tip, is get to know yourself so that you can make decisions in alignment with who you are. And whether that's through astrology, through, personality assessments of other sorts, there's so many different ways you can get to know yourself. Journaling's a great way. But really start to look at yourself as like, you are the expert in you. You are the expert in what's going to be good for you. It's not somebody outside of you. It's you that knows that better than anybody else.
Yeah, that's good. And that process of knowing yourself, it can be tricky and it can be hard
Yeah.
because I
Yes.
mean, we hear it like, get to know yourself and it's like this cliche stuff behind it. But when you really start to pull back the layers and do the work,
Yeah.
I just want to be transparent and say, yeah, you can definitely run into places and spaces in that, in that time that can be really hard to, number one, call it instead out of your mouth and then work through getting
Hmm.
through that thing. So I want to just make sure that we're doing our work
Yeah.
clearly, but that people know that journey can be, convoluted and hard.
And it can be time. It's not something that happens overnight. That's something that for me, as someone who likes to achieve goals, that can be really hard because I'm like, I want it to be fixed now. I want to know myself now. But it takes time. It takes, okay, I've learned this thing about myself. I'm going to try that on for size and see if that fits, see if it feels good. And if not, maybe that's not true, but at least, it's that back and forth. It's almost a conversation with yourself.
Yes, that's good. And I think this is an excellent segue because I know that you're newer in the entrepreneur journey. I think you said about 3 years from what we've
Hmm.
seen, and it still feels new. So I'm kind of the same boat. I left corporate in 2021. I really started to start walking the journey to 2022. I got to take some time off, but that walk was lonely. And I still feel that there's
Mm,
very many spaces, even when you get to going, that's very lonely in
yeah,
entrepreneurship, right?
yeah,
And it kind of ties back to knowing myself. If I had not done that work before, I think that this space of lonely would be a bit more intense because I hadn't done the work
absolutely.
before. So to kind of segue into this loneliness, I want you to talk about the loneliness that can exist when you're building something new,
Mm,
and really what you did in your headspace to kind of say, okay, you know what, I know what this is, but I'm still going to have to stay fueled for the journey.
yeah. Yeah, the loneliness for me, that's an interesting one because it started way before I became an entrepreneur. It was when I was married, when I was in a big community. I had loneliness then, but it stemmed from not being able to be myself in that community and in that space. And then when I was divorced and didn't have that community, I had the loneliness of I'm on an island by myself right now trying to figure out how I heal. And then as I kind of process through some of that, the loneliness stemmed more from the entrepreneurial journey. And that has probably been, in some ways, it's the hardest because there's so much input, right? You get on social media, you get online, and there's just so much input on what it means to be an entrepreneur, what we should be doing, what marketing, there's so much going on, but then that can really clog up our heads. And for me, the way that I dealt with that was again going back to who am I? Does this align? Does this resonate? Does it work for me? And with that, I also found a community of fellow entrepreneurs that I now connect with on a weekly basis. And that has been huge because I'm not now have all these things coming in, but I'm able to really like shut some of them out and be less in my head and more in my body and more in my heart. And a lot of that has been one, connecting to the community, two, connecting to my body. I do a lot of meditation, but I talk with my hands a lot. But I do a lot of just sitting back and feeling like hand on heart, hand on stomach, cleansing breath. What do I feel right now? And just noticing, right? I may not be able to fix it in the moment, but that noticing makes a huge difference and helps calm whether it's the loneliness or the angst from all the information that's coming in. It helps calm a lot of that.
Okay, so in terms of the services provided that you do, like in the astrology space, can
Mhm.
you maybe talk about kind of how they work? Are people
Yeah,
getting to spend some time with you for like, maybe 6 months? You can book a couple one-on-ones. Just tell us
yeah.
about how it's structured. And then really at the end of that, what piece of transformation are you looking to give to somebody who's wanting to sign
Mm,
up for the services?
yeah. So the most sought after service that I have is one-on-one coaching. And it's really because I have that HR background, that business background, and then the astrology, being able to bring those together to provide people with coaching, whether it's business owners or people who are still in the corporate space looking for professional development, being able to look at their birth chart. Again, it's a map of where the planets were when you were born and say, okay, here's the things that we can see about you based on your birth chart. None of it's a label, none of it's a box. There's energy throughout that we can really identify. Here's where it may show up really strongly. Here's where it may be a challenge for you. And then based on whatever it is, whether it's that professional development, whether it's looking at how do I market better, what language, what energy should I tap into for that? Why do I feel so stuck in my journey as an entrepreneur? Why do I feel so stuck in my healing journey? Those are questions that I get asked a lot. We're able to get a lot of the answers from the chart. And what that ends up doing is it's actually giving people the permission to find the answers within themselves. Because most often when I do this coaching with somebody, they go, that was so validating. Oh, I thought for so long that, I was just too loud or too bossy or too opinionated. But the fact is, I am an action taker. I am a leader. And so that's the transformation is we're going, here's what I thought was wrong with me. And here's how it's actually my superpower. And regardless of what they come in with, again, whether it's professional development, business ownership, entrepreneurship, relationship stuff that's going on, having that mindset shift from there's something wrong with me to these are my superpowers gives people the ability to go forward in that as themselves and trusting in themselves.
Mm, that's good. I mean, because this whole question of what's wrong with me, I mean, I'm like, what about all the things that's right? You know what I mean? Because we
Yeah.
always seem to focus on
Yeah.
I felt that to simply incorporate it. And I want you to go here because you talk about this ideology of combining astrology and professional development,
Hmm.
which I think is great because when I was in corporate, I often would have to go do my like on the side professional development because many of
Yep.
the I don't know. Some of it was great, but most of it was kind of like just check the box. We know you have to be in here to teach
That's,
something. You know
yeah.
what I mean. It's just check
Yeah.
the
It can
box.
feel really stale.
Yeah, it's just going to be in there. You have to go and sign up for it. They have all these modules, things of that nature. But I would always find myself kind of having to do my own thing on the side.
Yep.
So the fact that you've brought in astrology, and I think I had a guest too that's bringing in this whole energy thing. I'm loving to see the extra pulls on professional development because we are in need of different now. In case people haven't woke up and
Yes.
lived in the world right now, people are in need of different. So I want you to just talk to us a little bit about that play on astrology and professional development, just
Hmm.
briefly, and really the benefits there because I am an advocate of finding trainings and things that work for me. I can't just subscribe because it's what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I wanted
Yeah.
you to talk about it right there because I know the important space for these different types of methodologies to come into the corporate space.
Yeah. And I can give you an example. I actually just walked my whole leadership team, or nearly my whole leadership team, through this where we looked at their sun, moon, and rising signs. So, how they're meant to shine, what they need to feel satisfied and successful, and what their unique lens is. And, we have COO, we've got directors, we've got managers, and we all work really closely together. And so, walking everybody through this, and we're talking about those three things in their chart, you could kind of see the lights go on where somebody, I'd say, oh, your moon is in Virgo. You need things to be very much in aligned. You love crossing the T's and dotting the I's. You're detail oriented. And your sun is in Aries. You shine by getting things done, by taking action, by taking initiative on things. And then you'd see someone next to them going, oh my gosh, that explains everything, right? It doesn't literally explain everything, but it helps us understand one another. So it's not just getting this understanding of ourselves, it's also getting this understanding of each other. And with this, there's ways that I bring this in 1 hour coaching. There's ways that I bring this in multi-day coaching where we can go significantly deeper. But the goal of it is to give each other the space and the grace to be who we are. And when we do that, and when we understand kind of what makes each other tick, then when we're going into projects, when we're going into challenging conversations, when we're looking at big decisions that need to be made, we now have this foundational understanding that can withhold the weight of some of those things rather than going in without that, right? It's almost like you're the difference between trying to cross a chasm on a tightrope versus a well established bridge.
Man, and that knowing and understanding each other better is so important. I'm like,
Yeah.
in many of these spaces, especially in the corporate, where you're with those people more than you are with your family. So to be
Yeah.
able to, yeah, so to be able to understand and have another basis of communication is like what is key. I mean, because sometimes it's not the task of the job, it's maneuvering around the energy and the
Yep.
space of the people that are in the titles.
Yes.
So that's why when I hear a different lens into professional development, I'm always interested in it because I know that there are so many different ways to do it, and we just need different.
Yeah.
I want you to tell the people, Kelly, where they can find you, how they can sign up for the services. And then I know that you mentioned a link earlier in the broadcast. I think it was
Mhm.
for to find the Rise of the Moon. Just go ahead and drop all the
Yeah.
contact information as well as any links you want to provide to the audience.
Okay, so best way to find me is either on Instagram at most true you or my website mosttrueyou.com. And then from both of those you can get access to what I call Cosmic Confidence. It's a guide that tells you how to find your birth chart. So what website to go to, what to look for when you see it, and then it also gives information about your sun, moon and rising sign. So it's a really really good beginner's guide to your own astrology. And from there, you can find links to sign up for coaching. You can get my email address if you're interested in corporate development, trainings for your company. Um, all of it. Yeah. So Instagram, most true you, and then my website, mosttrueyou.com.
You have to get to this one because I didn't get to earlier. Most true you is definitely representative of what you embody and approach. Like, how did
Mhm.
you come to the name? Was it just kind of natural and organic? Did you have to play around with it? Because I think it's a great name, Most True You. How did you land there?
Ooh, I don't remember. That's a good question. I remember it started as I wanted to do a podcast and I wanted to interview people about what does it look like to show up authentically as yourself. But that word authentic is very widely used. And so I didn't want to just be another person who's using the word authentic. I think it's helpful, but it's not the only one out there. And so when I was naming the podcast, that's the point when I came up with Most True You. But I honestly think it was a gift that the universe gave me. Um, yeah, it started out with the podcast, but it's become the entire brand and the company.
Yeah, I love it. And authentic is, it's kind of like one of those buzzwords now. Like you do
Yeah.
hear it a lot. So to have something that's a little bit different is definitely cool. Kelly, this
Yeah.
is the
And
part
I
in our
didn't
show.
love the like best you, better you, higher you, right? I wanted it to
Mhm,
really get at
mhm.
like, who are you at your core? This isn't some different version. This is just who's that core that's maybe been hidden.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think every day I am wanting to be the most true me. And this
Mm,
podcast was really a birthing, an additional birthing of that because when I thought about it, we have the services that we have, and someone just really called me out on it. They said, Chenadra, where's your podcast? Like what you do best is really having conversations just naturally. And even
yeah.
in filming up to date, and I know this is another cliche title, but it hasn't felt like any work. Like this would be the same version if I had met Kelly and she gave me the opportunity to talk to her, it will feel the same. So I think that and me and having to align with that gives me like another level of being the most true me. So I'm just so honored,
Mm,
of course, that you're here and even to
love it.
really have done this process, even to this date. But I want to make sure that in this episode that we give you the opportunity to cue to your final thoughts. I always tell our guests this is your time so that if they get nothing else out this interview and they just happen to land here, what would be your final thoughts to best give us the essence of Kelly?
The biggest, best, brightest, most wonderful gift that you can give to the world is to live as your true self.
That's it. It doesn't have to be a lot of extra. That's it.
Mm-mm.
Kelly, thank you. What a beautiful interview. Thank you for
Thank you,
introducing
Shanidra.
me. Thank you for introducing me to something that I didn't know. These are learning experience for me. So to know that someone is infusing astrology and professional development, I think is absolutely amazing. Guys, I want to tell you, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been another fabulous episode of Her Voice Shines. I always tell you I love you. You can't get away from that. And remember to let your voice shine. And we are out.